Metroid Samus Returns just turned 5 years old, and I'm rather infamous in the Metroid community for how much I dislike this game. From the moment it was announced, I expressed my dissatisfaction with it. In my reaction videos and in my review in the end, I was very unhappy with the game. In the beginning, I did have this hype and this excitement of playing a brand new Metroid game, but that quickly faded and I didn't like the game. I was very outspoken about everything I disliked about this game, and obviously I got slated a lot over the years because I'm well known for saying that I much preferred Federation Force to this. To me, Samus Returns was the worst Metroid game. But here we are, it's 2022. The 15th of September marks 5 years since this game released. I'm uploading this video a few days before the actual anniversary simply because the Nintendo Direct is probably going to happen, and if there's a Metroid announcement, it'll overshadow this video. But I wanted to talk about this anyway because it's been 5 years and that's a good time to reflect. And with last year's release of Metroid Dread, it's definitely worth revisiting this game. And I said I would in a previous video that I would give this game another shot and see if my opinions have changed. If I view any of it differently, if I like the game now, or if I think it's just as bad or worse. So yeah, I went back and replayed it recently. And the interesting thing right off the bat is it does feel like a beta for Metroid Dread. That's something I'm sure no one will disagree with me on. It feels like a beta for Dread because technically it is. This game was made just so Mercury Steam could show they're capable of making a Metroid game. It introduced a lot of mechanics that we later see in Dread and that were perfected in Dread. The Aeon abilities, more importantly, the melee and the free aim. But as a remake, this game could only do so much. Dread has the benefit of being a brand new game. It's okay to go crazy and make all sorts of things with that. But this is a remake. To a degree, it has to maintain a certain sense of authenticity to it, which in my initial review, I said it didn't. I felt back then that the level design betrays what the original Metroid 2 set out to be, which may sound funny, but what I mean is that Metroid 2 was designed to be linear and simple. You defeat the Metroids, you progress, and it's got this level of fun, but also tension to it because of the limited environmental details. It adds this oppressive atmosphere. Whereas with Samus Returns, the environments were more grandiose, and while they were linear, they tried to expand them out and make them more complicated. And it led to very frustrating level design. It didn't help at all that the Metroids ran away from you. Not all of them, but some of them run away from you, and that becomes very annoying and tedious, and it drags the game out. It feels like padding, because it is. That much I still hold true. I still genuinely believe that I don't like the level design in this game. It doesn't feel right for what it's supposed to be. It becomes, especially the third area, Area 3, was just so complicated. You'd be going around the same area. The Metroids are hidden in the most obtuse places, which in theory is very faithful to the design philosophy of Metroid, but at the same time it's more annoying than it should be. The Aeon abilities in particular, in Samus Returns, they didn't add a lot. I still kind of feel the same way for the most part. They just feel tacked on. They feel useless. They don't serve a purpose. The beam burst could have just been an upgrade for the Spazer beam. I don't know why that's a thing. The lightning armor in particular is very tacked on, and the time stopping one, phase drift I think it was called. I didn't like those. The scan pulse was good. That was a good upgrade, and I think Metroid Dread handled that a bit better. But the other ones in this game, I don't think they add to the gameplay. They feel forced on and they don't contribute to the overall experience. But what about the actual combat? Because Combat is kind of integral to Metroid. Dread perfected that, and Samus Returns is a stepping stone towards Dread. But how did Samus Returns pull it off? The Aeon abilities, obviously, they were designed and implemented to add a layer of depth and strategy to the combat. They don't really, because the lightning armor and the phaser bursts or whatever, it makes combat cheesy, especially against like the Metroids. You can cheese through them quite quickly if you're spamming the phase burst. And so it becomes cheap, it becomes unenjoyable. Not all the bosses in this game are Metroids, that is worth saying. Obviously, you have Arachnus is back, and the inclusion of a new boss in this game. Two new bosses, I should say. One of them being Diggernaut, which was heavily featured in the advertising for this game. And that boss, yeah, that's a relatively fun boss. I will agree with the consensus on that. That's a fine boss. If the combat was a bit faster, it would be more enjoyable. But for what it is, and the confines it's working in, that boss fight is really fine. Proteus Ridley, apart ignoring the fact that I really think it's dumb they included him, and I don't like that he was forced into the game. The actual fight itself, really fun. It's up there for being one of the best Ridley fights. And it forces you to kind of use your different abilities in ways that a final boss should. So in terms of its design purpose, it succeeds in doing what it set out to do. It's just that from a story point of view, it doesn't make sense and it doesn't work. But from the gameplay point of view, which is what matters most, hey, that boss fight worked. I will agree. I will give kudos to Mercury Steam on that. The music and the art direction were the other two things I heavily criticize about this game. Starting off with the art direction, okay. A lot of it came down to Samus in particular. I really, back then when I first did my review of this game, I really disliked, I downright hated her design in this game. It didn't feel like Samus. When you look at her, she looks more evil or something. It's more like Dark Samus. The more Y-shaped visor, the shoulder pads seem bigger than usual. There's just something about this design that's more violent, aggressive than usual. Technically, that fits with the theme of the game, but it doesn't feel human. It just makes Samus feel weird, and the fact that she looks like Dark Samus constantly threw me off. I'm sad to say it still does. It's just a really jarring design, and it doesn't match up with how she looks in every other game. And that gets worse as you upgrade the suits. The gravity suit in particular is just a really hideous design. I still hold on firm to that belief. The gravity suit is hideous to look at. It's very jagged. It maintains the Dark Samus look. It just looks out of place. I can't really put my finger on it. It feels wrong for the character. That, my opinion, has not changed. I still think that is the worst looking design for Samus, and I'm glad they moved away from that. Dread's concept art, if you've seen the art book, has some designs that were very much similar to this, where her suit was going to be more based on Samus Returns. Thankfully, they changed that. The design similarities are still there, but they tweaked it to a standard that looks a lot better and makes a lot more sense. It's just that in Samus Returns, what we got doesn't look good. It's very awful looking. The music, back then I criticized Samus Returns music for being generic, for not remixing a lot of tracks, and for just being plain forgettable, for not creating an atmosphere. I felt back then that, Metroid 2, say what you want about the music, but it was very effective. It created a dense and oppressive atmosphere. It set the tone. Samus Returns did do that. The music was quiet and forgettable and generic, or else it was just Super Metroid and Metroid Prime remixes. There was a lot of that, and that really annoyed me. This didn't feel like a new game, simply for the fact that it was playing the Metroid Prime jingle whenever I was getting a missile tank. It was playing Super Metroid music anytime I went into a lava room, anytime I went into an area with water. That got really annoying and grated me very quickly. And the funny thing is, a lot of people dislike Dread's music. They think Dread was too. They criticize Dread for the reason I criticize Samus Returns, for being generic and not being iconic enough. But that's why I love Dread's music, because it didn't rely on remixes. It was fully original and it created an oppressive atmosphere that's tense. It accomplished what it set out to do. Samus Returns, SR388 is supposed to be a really dense and dark world. I'm trying not to use the word oppressive again, but that is what the atmosphere of these games is trying to be. Metroid 2 in particular, and this remake, Samus Returns, but it doesn't go for that. It makes the backgrounds bright and colourful, and it makes the music quiet and unfitting, to the point where not only does it not feel like the same planet from Metroid 2, but it also doesn't feel like Metroid, because why are there all these bright colours in the background when this is supposed to be twisted and creepy and unsettling? It's not faithful to Metroid 2 in any way. And I get that, yeah, Metroid 2 didn't have background details, and this game probably wasn't trying to be 100% faithful. It was trying to be new. And a lot of it is Mercury Steam trying to show off their artistic integrity so that they could work on Metroid Dread. But it clashes. It feels like a clash between trying to be a remake and trying to be a new game. I think ultimately, actually, that really sums up the experience. Metroid Samus Returns clashes between what it should be and what it's trying to be and what the developers want it to be. Those things don't all mash together very well, and it leads to a game that's not that fun to play. Granted, if you throw in earphones and you play the game away and listen to the background music, you can still get a bit of a creepy atmosphere. So it's not completely ineffective, but it's still just tame. It doesn't fit, it doesn't work. It's just tame when it should be more twisted and more imposing. One of the positives I will say about Samus Returns is the length of the game. This is something I didn't mention in my original review, but it is something that stands out to me even now. This game, the 2D Metroid games have a habit of being pretty short. Samus Returns, relatively speaking, is quite long. A lot of that is because of how obtuse some of the level design is and the backtracking, but it's a longer game, and I think that's a step in the right direction. I like that it's longer. Metroid Dread went back to being short, unfortunately, but I will say making this game longer, especially on the 3DS, it had been so long since the last 2D Metroid, and making it worth people's while in terms of how much time you're going to spend playing it, that's a good thing. I will say I'm happy with what they did there. So yeah, to round this all up, have my thoughts changed on Samus Returns? Am I still negative? Do I still hate this game? Is it good? Was I wrong? It hasn't changed that much. I did enjoy it a bit more, maybe because I've played Dread now, and I know that Mercury Steam can actually make a better game. But the consequence to that is that this game also just feels like a demo. It doesn't really feel like a full-fledged game because of Dread. It feels like a demo for what Dread is. But looking at it on its own merit, it's just a mix mash of things of design philosophies that don't particularly work well. It tries to be a remake of Metroid 2 and stay faithful, but it also tries to play it more like the other 2D games. But it also tries to be new and throw new concepts your way. And those things don't really mesh very well. All this game needed to be was as ominous and foreboding as Metroid 2 was. And it didn't do that. It didn't really add to the gameplay. Yeah, Samus technically controls smoother, but it's also a bit janky and clunky because it's on 3DS. And obviously the dash slows things down. It makes combat slower, you're stopping in your tracks to hit enemies. Enemies also take a lot more to kill, a lot more effort. So the result is an experience where the gameplay is slowed down and hampered by the design ideas. The level design is trying to be grandiose, but it can't be grandiose because it has to be tight and compact. So it doesn't work within its own confines. Mercury Steam originally pitched a Wii U and 3DS companion game, and then they pitched a Fusion remake. I said at the time that I didn't want any more Metroid remakes, but given their work on Dread, I think Mercury Steam have learned and could do a better remake in future, if they do Super or if they do Fusion. But all in all, 5 years later to the day, Metroid Samus Returns, I can have a bit more enjoyment with it, but at the end of the day, my opinions haven't changed. I still heavily dislike this game. There's a lot that just really bugs me, and there's a lot that just makes it unenjoyable. It makes it boring, and there's not a lot to push me forward. It feels counterintuitive as a Metroid game, and so it's not one I revisit often. I said a lot of negative things about Mercury Steam at the time and over the years since, but I've been forced to redact a lot of those because of the quality of Metroid Dread. But at the end of the day, the criticisms for Samus Returns in particular, they're still there for the most part. It's frustrating to play and it just baffles me. It doesn't feel like the game it's trying to remake. And for that reason, I will always choose Metroid 2 over this. This may be technologically superior, but Metroid 2 is more faithful to the Metroid concept and idea and genre. And yeah, all in all, Metroid Samus Returns, still think it's the worst one. It doesn't live up to the legacy of the other 2D games or even the 3D games. It doesn't even live up to the game it's trying to remake. And because of that, it finds itself pretty low down in the pecking order. But yeah, those are my thoughts. 5 years later, look, if it wasn't for this game, we wouldn't have gotten Metroid 5. That is the reality of it. And who knows where else the future of Metroid would be if not for this game. So I do owe it some credit. But all in all, those are my thoughts and opinions. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the comment section below. How do you feel about Metroid Samus Returns 5 years on? Do you still feel the exact same way about it that you did back in 2017? Have your feelings changed comparing it to Dread? Do you still think it's fun? Do you think it's the best one, or do you agree with me? I want to hear everything you have to say down in the comment section below. And yeah, with that all said, thank you all for watching and please subscribe. Novus Corvis out.